The Man in the Moon. It all began with a library book that was entitled The Man in the Moon, in which Captain Gillian and her loyal friends, twin teddy bears called Muff and Stuff, travel to the moon on a spaceship. There they meet the Man in the Moon, who entertains them in his underground castle and explains that he only comes out at night because he is very sensitive to sunburn. The Man in the Moon treats them to moonful ice cream, a flavour that's only found on the moon. After Gillian and her friends have eaten their fill of moonful ice cream, because with moonful you need more than a spoonful, the Man in the Moon accompanies them back to their spaceship. He gives each of them egg sandwiches, juice and an apple to sustain them on their return journey to Earth. 4-year-old Gillian was enchanted with the story, especially because Captain Gillian of the spaceship had exactly the same name that she did. She demanded the story be read to her every night. "Daddy, read it again, please." And even when the book had to be returned to the library, Gillian insisted that the story be retold. Since daddies, unlike 4-year-olds, can become tired of repeating precisely the same story night after night, it was inevitable that new adventures of Gillian, Muff and Stuff would gradually be incorporated into the narrative. On one occasion, for example, Stuff ate so much moonful ice cream his tummy hurt, and Muff had to rub it better all the way home. With the gradual expansion of his persona, it's not to be wondered at that the Man in the Moon gradually morphed into a combination of Santa Claus and miracle worker, who could remotely influence the fortunes of Gillian and her family back on Earth. So it was that the Man in the Moon became aware of any misdeeds of Muff or Stuff, and was even able to help them find their way home whenever they got lost here on Earth. But in addition, the Man in the Moon was able to predict future events with uncanny accuracy, such as visits by family members, vacation destinations, and invitations to birthday parties. Captain Gillian made several return visits to the moon. She and the Man in the Moon became fast friends. It was a disappointment to the earthbound Gillian that her lunar friend could not visit her at home on account of his sunlight allergy. To compensate, the 4-year-old soon became remarkably well versed in the cycles of the moon and insisted that she and her daddy should stay up late to say hello to the Man in the Moon whenever the moon was full. And even though Gillian really enjoyed his strawberry ice cream, she couldn't help wondering whether the moonful ice cream would have an even better flavour. Unsurprisingly to the initiated, the Man in the Moon gave Gillian identical teddy bears as a Christmas present, and the new Muff and Stuff became her inseparable companions. An accompanying gift was a set of 3 moon passports, issued to Captain Gillian, Muff and Stuff in the name of the Man in the Moon. These were covered in dark blue leatherette, but very similar in appearance to the passports that the family had used when they visited Gillian's cousin and her family in Chicago for American Thanksgiving. These documents soon became very well thumbed, as befitted the passports of frequent travellers. When Gillian reached the age of 7 and began to read, she and her father invented a game that they played on Saturday mornings, when she would run into her parents' bedroom and jump into their bed. Each of them would take turns at making up a rhyme for the Man in the Moon. For example, the Man in the Moon had a yellow balloon. The Man in the Moon ate his lunch with a spoon. The Man in the Moon sang a beautiful tune. The Man in the Moon never comes out at noon. Gradually this list became expanded. On a camping trip to the lake they were able to add, the Man in the Moon on the lake saw a loon. The Man in the Moon found a baby raccoon. The Man in the Moon saw a butterfly cocoon. The winner of the game was whoever did not run out of new sayings, although there was some ambiguity about what counted as repeats. Generally speaking, balloons could not be yellow, orange and purple all on the same day, nor could raccoons be simultaneously babies, mothers and fathers. However, this rule was not enforced uniformly, with the result that Gillian was almost always the winner of the game. Although on one memorable occasion, reference to an impartial observer, that's Mummy, that allowed that the man in the moon didn't come out at noon, had to be considered a duplicate. The man in the moon never comes out at noon. Gillian reluctantly agreed that the man in the moon ate a yellow balloon and should be excluded on the grounds that he would get a very bad tummy ache if he attempted such a repast. Indeed, said Mummy, this was a little girl should never attempt such a thing. And although Gillian always vetoed Daddy's attempts to associate the man in the moon with a boon or a rune, she herself insisted that a zoon was one of the man in the moon's assistants in his underground castle. So Zoon was added to the corpus, as in the man in the moon had a friend called a Zoon. Surprisingly, however, no one ever thought to associate the man in the moon with a lagoon, blue, sleepy or otherwise. A few months before her 10th birthday, Gillian came down with a fever that seemed not to go away. She became pale and tired and listless. Dr. Reynolds at first attributed the fever and tiredness presence of an undiagnosed viral infection. But when the condition persisted, she took a blood sample for testing. The results of the blood work came back as Dr. Reynolds had feared. There was an abnormally large count of immature white blood cells. There was also a depressed red cell count, which accounted for Gillian's pallor and listlessness. Very gently, the doctor explained to Gillian's horrified parents a diagnosis that every parent dreads: leukemia. Dr. Reynolds tried to reassure the parents that leukemia is not the death sentence that it was years ago. Especially in children, the cure rate is now very high. She immediately made arrangements for Gillian and her parents to see a cancer specialist at the Children's Hospital. Dr. Sheena Khan was businesslike, yet at the same time gentle and compassionate. She ordered further tests, which confirmed her initial suspicion that Gillian was suffering from AML, properly known as acute myelogenous leukemia. She explained that cures for AML are now achieved for 3/4 of all patients, but it would be necessary to begin treatment, that's chemo, at once. And Gillian became an inpatient, as the drugs she was to be given were very powerful. Muff and Stuff kept her company. Muff on the left and Stuff at her right. Gillian's mother took a room in a hostel for parents attached to the Children's Hospital so she could remain with her daughter. Daddy visited every weekend. Unfortunately, Gillian's AML proved not to be amenable to treatment. Her white cell count showed little improvement following the chemo, and she became very sick. After 3 rounds of chemo, Dr. Khan had to tell Gillian's parents there was nothing more that she could do. Gillian's condition was now palliative. She and her colleagues would do all they could to keep Gillian comfortable. Both parents kept vigil at her bedside, willing the cancer to recede and place Gillian into remission, but to no avail. Gillian began to slip away. On her final evening, Gillian had one of those rare moments of lucidity that sometimes happen with dying patients. She opened her eyes and said clearly to her daddy, "The man in the moon says I'll be with him soon." And she smiled. When at the funeral home it was time to close the lid of Gillian's casket, her parents had a final obligation to carry out. They brought items that they would dearly have liked to keep as mementos of their daughter's life. But as Mummy said, Gillian needs them more than we do. Daddy placed Muff at her left shoulder, Mummy placed Stuff at her right, and on her chest they placed a Ziploc bag. In it were the 3 passports issued by the man in the moon, travel documents needed to accompany Captain Gillian and her friends on their final journey.